Hey there, my name is Chris Acton with Acting Creative, and this is A Handwoven Experience, episode 35. And today, today we're going low. Matter of fact, we are underneath the loom because we're going to talk about treadles and tie-ups. And boy, let me tell you how to do some serious dusting for this episode. So let's start with giving you a frame of reference. I am sitting on the floor underneath my loom. I have a shaft 36 inch. It's considered a jack loom. So you see my fabric right here. This is what it's going to wind onto. I'm kind of at the beginning of the project, but it'll wind onto here as I go through the project. And then you see these petals down here that are called treadles. So let me back up for just a moment. In a jack loom, which is what I have here, the way they separate the yarns from each other is that they push the shafts up. In other styles of looms, you may have the yarns where they both separate, but in this case, when you want to separate the warp yarns, they just get pushed up. That's the action, the motion of the loom. So what that means here is that I have this set of, these are called treadles, down here that are connected to, these are called lambs, L-A-M-M, 2 M's, because, you know, why not have two instead of one? And so what happens is that when I push down a treadle here, the lamb connects to this whole system that then lifts up. Can you see in the, let's see, can you see right there? See the shaft moves up, oops, right there? Yeah, right there. So that's the motion of the loom. So let's talk about treadles for a moment. Now you notice that I have, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 treadles, even though it is a 4 shaft loom. And what I understand, the reason they do this is that you can have 1 treadle per shaft, and then you still have an additional 2 to always do plain weave, or tabby is what they might be calling it. And when I first learned, they always recommended that you have, like, these are your 2 tabby treadles and the rest could be for your pattern. But just as a side note, I tend to do it a little bit differently. I like to have my tabbies on the outside. So this one would always lift up half the yarns and this one will always lift up the other half. For me, the motion is easier to have just going from left to right versus having to keep track of 1 foot. That's just a little side note, just a personal kind of FYI. But that's part of the reason that you would have more than 4, why you would have 6, so that you have a lot of options for how to designate your pattern. So then let's talk about tie-ups. Okay, so you may have heard the phrase a direct tie-up, and that is typically, like, my table loom is set up like that, which means 1 lever on my table loom is connected to 1 shaft. End of sentence, no other options. Well, in this case, you can associate 1 treadle with more than 1 shaft, which gives you a lot of cool options. And the way you do that is you use something called a tie-up. This is a fancy one here. I don't know if you can see with the light. It's got like a little bead on the end of it. It's all really nicely done. And I have a handful of these and the rest I just kind of made up, which it doesn't have to be really fancy for them to work. Let me show you how this works. So the lambs here that we talked about, which are these kind of wooden rods that connect to the whole mechanism. What happens is that these, if I take these out like that, it just lays flat. That's the whole. It's not going to do much good until it's connected to everything else. And the way you connect to everything else is through a tie-up. So these are some that I just made. I took a cord, wrapped it through the hole in the lamb, and then made a little knot. And what you want to do then is start from the front here and then just slide it. There's a little slot there. You just slide it in just like that. And then, because I wanted this one to be 1 and 3, 1 is always closest to you if you're sitting at the front of the loom. Because I wanted to be 1 and 3, then I see that guy there. Then I ran another cord through what would be the 3rd lamb that connects to shaft number 3. And then I'm going to slide that right in like that. So what that tells me then is that when I push down this with my foot, then it will lift up shafts 1 and 3 up above. Does that kind of make sense? So like I mentioned, they don't have to be fancy. I have some that are very old and probably will snap one day, but you know, they're fine till then. And I've got some that are like official ones that you can get from, you know, a loom company that makes accessories, but you don't have to. And I have it currently kind of set up so that these 4 in the middle then are like a 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't remember what pattern I did where I had to crawl under here and set it up like this, but I just kind of left it like that afterwards. And I tend to, I don't necessarily take the tie-ups out if I don't need them, because they're not hurting anything if they're just hanging down here. But you certainly, if you like to have everything neat and tidy, go ahead, take out the extras. That is no problem. And what you'll do is when you come to a pattern, it will give you some guidance as to which what they recommend for the treadling and the tie-ups, and that can completely change your project, which is so cool because you could do a project halfway through, change how your treadles are connected to your shafts, and then the pattern looks completely different. It is very cool and a really easy way to bring a lot of variety into your project. So I thought I would just sneak you down here to the underbelly of the loom so you could kind of see how all the pieces fit together, and give you some ideas for how you can play with your next project just by adjusting your tie-ups and your treadles. So that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you learned a little something new here. So until next time, my friend, have a great week and happy weaving.